So I gotta, because this is kind of Nebraska football-y. We got into this yesterday, and BC, I hate that we use the word should. I almost never do in sports. Well, they should win, and this, that, and the other. And we got into like the formula for Nebraska to have a way back to the playoffs
Mm.
or a playoff discussion or national relevance. And we picked the number 9. And I said, it's funny, that number has long drawn the ire of Nebraska fans for decades. We pin it to Pelini, but it was like that in the second half of the 70s, the second half of the 80s.
Yep.
It doomed Coach Soul. It's like it was negative with Bo. Like, it's just never been a good number. And I said, the only time I'm going to use this term is Nebraska made hay during those 30 years by beating the teams they were supposed to beat. And
Mm.
I hate it, but I never think fans should apologize for beating bad teams, because that's how you get big numbers. Golden State got to 72 by beating everybody they should, when they
Hmm.
should. The most impressive thing about getting to 72 was they beat bad teams on off nights when they didn't have to play hard on a midweek
Hmm.
Wednesday night game, right? I don't think, if you're getting drummed by bad teams in the Major League Baseball, that's fine. I wish more good teams would drum bad teams, because in baseball, BC, never
Hmm.
apologize. It's hard. So, because even the Rockies have a good arm or two. They have a
Right.
good player or two. Like, you can't. I don't know, man. I think it's you. If you want to do what the Twins are doing in the Central, you have to do it at the expense of teams. You got to take advantage of the White Sox. I mean,
Yeah. 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 I'm not going to apologize for it. We were 7-13, and I was on here a few weeks ago, like, oh yeah, the Tigers are going to win. I was like so down. I was talking up the Tigers on here. I remember that. So yeah, I'm not taking back those wins over the White Sox, and it's a good point about Husker football. As tough as the November was with those close losses, um, that October, I'd been waiting. That's why, in part, why November was disappointing to fall after, because I'd been waiting for a month like October where they beat Northwestern, Purdue, Illinois. Those are teams I'd always like circled more than these like supposed marquee games that are going to air on prime time or whatever. I kept thinking to myself, that's the step Nebraska has to take, where you got to claim those games. And we don't even have to call those teams bad teams, because they're not, but like those middle teams right now, sort of bunched up in the middle, you've got to get to the top of the middle and then work from there. And so, yeah, that's me trying to connect the Twins beating the White Sox 7 times to Nebraska's October 3-game winning streak.
yeah, it would be nice if we handled North Dakota or beat South Dakota State or beat Ball State, or
Yeah.
like, I just can't,
Or didn't need an Amir Abdullah miracle to beat McNeese State.
right? So,
Like,
or lose to Troy,
yeah.
right? Like,
Or Georgia Southern.
it's just like
Well,
at some point you have to take advantage of that if you ever.
Because
Like,
let's not pretend like the SEC doesn't have
and listen, how often does like Iowa get upset? Not often.
not a ton.
Right? Like how often do teams that are consistent lose to programs that they're perceived better than? Like, that's just got to be part of the discussion if you ever want to be relevant again. You can't lose to.
That's how you raise the floor.
You can't lose to Maryland, right? You can't lose to
Michigan State
or Indiana or Minnesota when they bring 50 guys, right? Like, you can't lose those kinds of games.
Yeah, I mean that's a big step for Rhule in this program to take.
So BC, I wanted to ask you this about the 9 wins, because I think DB's right. It's always been kind of a bugaboo number in people's heads, and I don't know if it's just because it's not the you get to double-digit wins, it just feels different, right? But do you think the context of what 9 wins could mean moving forward? And by that, I mean, I did the research on it through the playoff era. If you get to 9 wins, you're going to be in the neighborhood of that number 12 spot. Some years you'll be in, some years you'll be out, but you'll be in the conversation for sure. Do you think that new context of what 9 wins means will help Nebraska fans get over that mental hurdle?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, nine wins. You're right. In this day and age, would probably put you right on the doorstep of the playoff. And it's going to be more of that NFL mentality. It has been in college football for a long time, and I think more and more fans are realizing that. You've heard, Matt Rhule talk about it. I know I'm not probably supposed to bring up Trev's name, but Trev Alberts always used to talk about that, like, get used to these games, that are going to go down to the last 5 minutes. They're going to be decided by 3 or 4 points. It's like Sunday, at 2:50 p.m. Central around here, where you turn on the NFL and it's going to go down to the last drive. And that's why, like, when you had, Coach Rhule on the show last week, and the way he stresses all those little things, and the way the theme is chasing 3, in the off season and stuff, it's understood. Like, I mean, that's the climate we're living in now with these games. You've just got to have that 1 or 2 extra details to put you over the top. And along the way, of course, with that, because these games are so close, it's just common math. You're going to lose a couple probably in a lot of years where maybe you have a really good team, but you lose by 4 points one week, but you win your share and you end up 9-3. And you're right, Ravi. I mean, you're right there in the conversation. Then if you notch a big win on your belt and take care of the games Damon was talking about earlier, it's just like handle your business. So I do think we'll look at that number a little different. We'll also look at it differently because it's been a while, right? I mean, Nebraska's been stuck on 4 or 5 for so long. I mean, 9, you're doubling the win total basically. So I think people will be through the moon about it. And if they're not, we have to have a talk with them because they should be at this point.
Yeah, he walks Coach Rhule, doesn't he walk like it's almost mythical, but I'll just stick with magical. I guess there could be intertwined this fine line between being such a hardcore realist, and he constantly reminds, hey, we're 5-17. Hey, we haven't won enough for folks to tell me what to do. Like, just let me do my job. Or, hey, this is what you get when you hire me, right? Like, he's told us all along where our pecking order is. Now, whether we subscribe to that, buy into it, or realize it real time, I guess that's on us. But he walks this line of telling us exactly where we are without being deterred by where he thinks we're going, right? Like, he has a gift for that. There's this real pragmatic component to him, but he can cast a vision that comes across as very believable because you can see the plan kind of unfolding. Is that kind of what you get?
Yeah, I think so. And also, you can do a lot of good things in the off season like they're doing. Like, I mean, this weekend in Omaha is a prime example of that, where that's a real thing that if you keep consistently doing that, that's going to help you with recruiting and help you within the state. And that's one of those things that's a good headline. And it's like a very positive thing when we're not playing games for 4 months. You can do that and still not get caught up in patting yourself on the back or like buying into this, there's that whole narrative. Nebraska always wins the off season, right? Like that's been out there for a few years. They're so good at like social media and the way fans and media sort of produce it. Sometimes that people are like, yeah, they do well. And then you get to the games, it's a different story. I think to your question, he does a good job like having that positive stuff happen, but it's sort of it's natural. It comes on naturally. Like it's things just like people nod their head. They're like, yeah, that's what they should be doing. But it's also not like Rhule and staff acting like this is magically going to get you 8 or 9 wins just because that happened. You still got to put in the work between the lines and all the stuff that people don't see. And so I think he does a good job with that balance, which is, I think, a trickier balance than some realize.
BC, I'm wondering here as we get into what it looks like from going to 4 or 5 wins to 8, 9 wins, right? I went through this exercise with DB yesterday of, you mentioned, hey, you don't have to go 5-0 in the games that Nebraska lost by single digits last year. You just go 2-3 or 3-2, and all of a sudden asking them to win 7 or 8 this year doesn't seem like a leap. Is that a fair exercise to go through when you're talking about doing the little things and kind of making up that margin of error?
He was a little more emphatic, BC. He said just be average. You don't have to run the table. Go 2-3
or
3-2.
That's coin flip games, right? Go 50-50 in coin flip games.
You know, and I just that kind of actually, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm listening.
Because you could still be as mediocre as you were last year, and if you just win the coin flip games, win half of them, right? All of a sudden, we're having a totally different conversation this year.
Yeah. And while doing so, I think your point's right on. So I don't have much more to say to that. But I mean, it's just building the habits. No, I mean, it's just.
DB hates it when people agree with me.
It's just so rare.
I found myself agreeing with Ravi a little.
I know it's sad. It's starting to really get under my skin because sometimes I do too.
You might be maturing, or
I know it, man.
I'm definitely not maturing, so it might be the other thing.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, it's but also within those games that it's like handling your business, but also building the habits within them. It's like, you play UTEP that first game, and I liked, I listened like everybody else last week when he was on your show, and I liked that he was saying, don't we're going to talk about Colorado. That's just the way it's going to be. But it's like, his focus and the team's focus has got to be on that first game. It's like, let's be 1-0 for the first time since 2019. Like you got to check these boxes first. And there's enough of those little things that should motivate a team. Like, let's have the first weekend of college football not be sad around here. That's been honestly a really tough thing for Husker football. Like, yeah, the losses obviously hurts, but it's like that first week Nebraska's lost games on week 0, and you can feel it around this state, and it penetrates inside the walls, like in those years where it's like, man, there's already a dark cloud hanging over this season. How do you even get this thing back on track? So I like the fact it's like, take care of the first game first. Let's just worry about that. The big one will come after that. It naturally does. And then, as Ravi says, there's those games, if you tick off enough of them, you will be at 8 wins or so. If you bat like a, 667 percentage or something, on those sort of toss-up games. So the opening of the schedule definitely gives opportunity. We can look at that big picture, I guess, but I like that. I think they're going to be more, focused, micro-focused on it on each game, and that's going to be key.
I had a couple of conversations, one in depth with a couple of Metro coaches, good Metro coaches, right? And guys we play against commenting on the interview, right? One of the guys was like, man, he said incredible, it was unbelievable, and I found it got me to think, right? Because we talked for 40 minutes and barely talked about any real football.
Not like on-field stuff, no.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Right.
And it's just, it was whatever, right? Because sometimes you just have to go with the natural flow of the conversation, right? He said, you guys talk about Malcolm Gladwell and Philosoph more than any sports talk show I've ever been on, including, or any radio station I've ever been on, including NPR. And I'm like, but we're still captivated. What is it, BC? You transcribed almost the whole thing. Like, what is it that keeps us captivated and encouraged without even really talking football, when all I've heard for 15 years is we don't have enough talent. You hear all the reasons why we're not winning. Like, why is that so engaging?
I just think it's fun when you have a football coach who's willing to branch out and really have just a layered conversation and take it beyond. And there's plenty. I'm not saying there's not coaches around here who do this, but I think sometimes when you get to that level that Matt Rhule's at, there's a lot of coaches who really they keep it so concise that they don't say anything at all. Sometimes you get so buttoned up about everything, and sometimes it's not even necessary. And so I just appreciate, like, whatever question or topic you lead him into, you're going to get usually a thorough thought on it. He knows that, you're not hiding the deepest secrets in the war chest on some of this stuff. It's just conversation that fans appreciate, getting a look here, a look there inside the program. and understanding you're the main outlet to that for fans, a passionate fan base. And I think he's done as well as any coach that's been here at that. And I don't think that's an overstatement at all. I think it's pretty obvious he's been that. I mean, and part of the reason, like, I actually felt bad because I was transcribing some of the interview, and I try to not write too much, honestly, too much of the quote, because I want people to listen to it and not take credit away from who did the interview. But what's interesting is when he starts to say something, it's such a thorough thought that I find that if you cut it off after like a sentence or two, it's not fair to his point that he's making. You know what I mean?
That's
so, like,
real. That's real. That's really good, BC. I agree with you.
Yeah.
So that's where, like, yeah, I hate, like, trust me, but we did it to you guys a little bit. But the aggregate thing is kind of gets on, it grinds my gears, I guess, and that so we do it back sometimes. But I think with him in particular, it's like, man, this is a thought. Like, I can't stop it here because he's getting to that. He's using that to get to this, and it's not fair to what he's trying to say. So that's sort of that's a good, like, problem to have, though, as like when you're transcribing or you're going through somebody. That's a guy who's a good quote when it does that. I mean, when he's telling the story about using a humorous, joke about with Marcus Satterfield, and like, I thought that was like just a great line that really encapsulated, like, and could make a person who's sort of maybe been a little down on how things went, and like, I don't know about this guy, and like you hear the way he told that, and that particular anecdote he used, and it was like, okay, that I get it, yeah, that applies really well to that, and that's a gift to be able to do that.
Yeah, man, BC is rolling. So when he said, and I think he said, I told DB the other day, like when he said it when I was at practice, he wasn't in like the greatest of moods, and he was like kind of just short of kind of poking me in my chest. He was very close to me when he was telling this story. And if you're watching, were you watching his mannerisms, BC, or were you just listening?
I did. I was just listening.
Okay,
I was at a.
So yeah. He doesn't even blink when he retells the story, and he's secure enough to live with whatever it is that we glean from that. And he uses it as he was proving a point the other day, and I guess he was proving a point during the interview, but it came across different because now all of a sudden you're like, I took it completely different the other day than I did Thursday when he said it, and it was the exact same story.
Yeah. Yeah, I took it. It was kind of fun, humorous the way he presented it, and I just thought that was a really good, like, example to use that I think a fan says, okay, yeah, I see, yeah, that connects to what was with this football team last year. Yes, they had multiple injuries at running back. 3 guys went out at O-line in 1 week, and your quarterback isn't what you thought it was going to be. Now the other side of this, to even it out, as people say, that offense was down. 104th in yards per play, and you picked your quarterback. So we can even this out and say there's things that you can take tough critiques at, because that's what goes with the job. But I think he does a good job at presenting, as they're trying to iron some stuff out, some of the challenges, without also making it seem as though it's, woe is us, or complaining, or throwing anybody under the bus. And there was none of that. So I think that's what makes it very successful in the way it's communicated.
Well, BC, kind of along those lines, another thing he said going up to the spring game was he talks about, I know that Nebraskans want to see the quarterbacks and everything like that, but he's like, I think they really just want to not see us put the ball on the floor. And when you he says that as a joke,
I laugh real time too, but I get it now.
But also, let's go back to the first question, or one of the first questions I asked you, where I go, okay, if they just don't put the ball on the floor, they win 50% of those coin flip games, right? Like, just like that. Nothing else changes.
Yeah.
If they stop putting the ball on the floor, they win at least 2 or 3 of those 50-50 games. And all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, Nebraskans would love that, actually. Like, they would have loved that.
He said it so matter of fact.
And everybody laughed.
And we just like pushed it on by.
Right. But the big reason, Dylan Ryle is a big part of why people are pumped walking out of that spring game. But it was the fact that was a spring game where there was a couple turnovers, but you didn't feel like it was just a clunky production, where there's all these procedure penalties and you're just, rolling the snap back and all this stuff. And if you think back to last year's spring game, he's right. That's like how it was. And there were other scrimmages that preceded that where he told us, we didn't see him in the media, but he told us that they were a little sloppy with some of that stuff. And back then it was sort of like, they'll get that stuff ironed out by the fall, but they didn't. It was those were the habits and stuff that built, and just sort of what that group was, and some of the quarterback issues. And so that comment he made, it was a little humorous about, let's just not put the ball on the ground, but it has big meaning, and they know that if you flip minus 17 in turnovers and make that even, that's 3 or 4 wins right there. Like if you took I think they averaged like 5.08 per play last year, which was 104th. If they were like 5.80, I was just looking at that number, they'd be top 60. If you combine that with a defense that could up it up to 20 takeaways as opposed to 14, what does that do for you? That's probably 2 or 3 more wins, just on those numbers. And obviously that you get inside those numbers and specific plays that happens within games. But I like that approach. And, sometimes what is said with a little bit of humor also makes a pretty fine-edged point, I think.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. Great stuff as always, BC. We appreciate your time. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, B.
Yeah, thanks, guys.